Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy my video, please click the like button and share the video. It is the only way the YouTube algorithms really notices me. I will be very grateful to you. The Grinding of Bone in the Dark. Scary story published by Scare Fiction. Read for you by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1. The Call of Duty. The California sun, filtered through a dense canopy of redwoods, cast an eerie twilight onto the ranger cabin. Sarah squinted at the flickering monitor, its glow the only illumination fighting back the encroaching darkness. Dust motes danced in the feeble light, a silent ballet accompanying the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of her fingers on the worn wooden desk. Boredom gnawed at her. This wasn't what she signed up for. Her imagination, fueled by childhood nights spent devouring campfire stories, had conjured images of daring rescues and thrilling encounters with elusive wildlife. Reality, however, was a far cry from those fantasies. A metallic rasp erupted from the radio, shattering the silence. Sarah jolted upright, heart hammering against her ribs. "This is Ranger Station Alpha, receiving," she barked into the crackling receiver. Ranger Wilson, reporting from Patrol Sector B, came the familiar voice of her gruff old mentor, a man who seemed more comfortable wrestling grizzly bears than filing paperwork. "We've got a distress beacon activation deep within the restricted zone, the Howling Woods. You're closest. Gear up, rookie." A jolt of nervous excitement shot through Sarah. The Howling Woods. Locals whispered about strange lights and unsettling sounds emanating from its depths. Officially, it was off-limits due to unstable terrain and unforeseen environmental hazards. Unofficially, it was a place avoided at all costs, a festering wound on the pristine canvas of Redwood National Park. Sarah's stomach churned a mixture of apprehension and something that felt suspiciously like exhilaration. This was her chance, her shot at proving she wasn't just some wide-eyed newbie. A glance out the window revealed the sun sinking behind the towering redwoods, casting long, menacing shadows across the clearing. The darkness felt heavier somehow, imbued with a malevolent energy. She grabbed her backpack, the familiar weight of the emergency kit, flashlight, and compass a comforting tether to reality. Protocol, that nagging voice in the back of her head reminded her, dictated contacting a more experienced ranger for this kind of situation. But a rebellious spark ignited within her. "Ranger Wilson," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, beacon location confirmed. "I'm on my way." Hanging up, Sarah felt a rush of adrenaline. This was her moment to shine, to silence the doubts gnawing at her own resolve. She was Sarah Wilson, park ranger, and tonight, the Howling Woods wouldn't be howling at the moon alone. The oppressive darkness seemed to close in as she stepped out of the cabin. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and an unsettling stillness settled around her. Taking a deep breath, Sarah shouldered her pack and plunged into the twilight, the dense forest swallowing her whole. Somewhere deep within those shadowed woods, a beacon pulsed, a silent plea for help. And Sarah, for better or worse, was determined to answer. Chapter 2. Descent into Darkness. The forest floor crunched under Sarah's boots, the damp earth releasing a pungent, earthy smell with each step. The towering redwoods, their silhouettes stark against the fading light, formed a claustrophobic canopy overhead. Sunlight, once a comforting presence, barely penetrated the dense foliage, casting long, distorted shadows that danced at the edges of her vision. An unsettling silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig underfoot or the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. It was a different kind of quiet than the peaceful solitude she was used to. This silence felt heavy, watchful, as if 1,000 unseen eyes were observing her every move. The trail, barely a discernible path through the dense undergrowth, grew progressively more treacherous. Loose rocks sent her ankle rolling, and gnarled branches snagged at her backpack with a menacing rasp. The air grew cooler, a damp chill seeping through her jacket. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of nervous energy through her. Suddenly, the dense canopy thinned, revealing a sight that sent a shiver down her spine. A cluster of crumbling wooden structures emerged from the encroaching forest, their weathered planks stained a sickly gray by time and neglect. Abandoned mining equipment lay scattered around, rusted testament to a forgotten industry. Sarah's heart pounded a frantic tattoo against her ribs. The Howling Woods wasn't just a local legend. It held the secrets of a bygone era, a chilling reminder of the fleeting nature of human endeavors in the face of nature's raw power. A low, guttural moan echoed through the clearing, rolling off the skeletal frames of the abandoned buildings. It wasn't the cry of any animal she knew, a primal sound that resonated deep within her primal core. Her grip tightened on the flashlight, its beam cutting through the encroaching darkness. As she ventured deeper into the clearing, Sarah noticed a gaping maw in the earth beneath the ruins of a collapsed building. A metal ladder, rusted and warped, led down into the inky blackness below. The distress beacon's faint signal pulsed from somewhere within that abyss, a desperate heartbeat drawing her deeper into the heart of this forgotten place. Uncertainty gnawed at her. This wasn't part of the Ranger training manual. Yet the thought of turning back, leaving someone in potential danger, filled her with a steely resolve. Taking a deep breath, Sarah gripped the cold metal rungs of the ladder and began her descent into the darkness, the chilling moan echoing ominously in her ears. Chapter 3: Echoes of the Past. The stale, damp air of the mine shaft clung to Sarah like a shroud as she descended deeper. The rickety ladder groaned under her weight, each creak amplified in the oppressive silence. The darkness seemed to solidify around her, the only light coming from the meager beam of her flashlight. Her breath echoed in her ears, a frantic counterpoint to the low, rhythmic dripping of unseen water somewhere in the distance. As she reached the bottom of the ladder, the faint, metallic tang of rust filled her nostrils. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. The faint thump-thump of the distress beacon guided her deeper into the labyrinthine tunnels. But a new sound began to weave itself into the symphony of the darkness, a low, grinding noise, like bone scraping against stone. It seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, sending shivers down her spine. The passage twisted and turned, each bend revealing more remnants of a forgotten past. Rusted pickaxes and shovels lay scattered on the damp floor, silent testaments to the back-breaking labor that once took place here. Messages, etched hastily into the rough stone walls, spoke of hardship and despair. One reads simply, "Trapped. No escape." A cold sweat slicked Sarah's skin. Who had written these messages? What had happened to them? Suddenly, the passage opened into a large cavern. The faint light of her flashlight revealed murals painted across the walls, their pigments faded with age, but still stark and unsettling. Twisted figures writhed in agony, their limbs contorted in a macabre dance. At the center of the mural, a group of hooded figures chanted around a blazing altar, smoke curling towards the unseen ceiling. Bile rose in Sarah's throat. This wasn't some forgotten mining operation. It was a place of darkness, a scene from a nightmare come to life. The grinding sound grew louder, echoing with a bone-chilling intensity. Sarah spun around, flashlight beam searching the cavern, but there was nothing. Just decaying timbers and the oppressive darkness. Then, She saw it, a faint flicker of movement in the corner of her vision. A shadow, fleeting and insubstantial, darted through the gloom before vanishing without a trace. Panic clawed at her throat. Was it just a trick of the light, a figment of her overactive imagination? Or was something lurking in this darkness, unseen but present, toying with her sanity? Doubts gnawed at the edges of her resolve. How long had she been down here? Time seemed to be losing its meaning, distorted by the oppressive atmosphere and the relentless grinding that seemed to echo through her very bones. She stumbled backward, heart hammering against her ribs, and tripped over a loose stone. The impact sent a jolt of pain through her ankle. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring the already dim light. Fear, raw and primal, threatened to consume her. Was this what it felt like to lose your mind, to be swallowed whole by the darkness? Chapter 4. Trapped. Pain lanced through Sarah's ankle as she landed, the beam of her flashlight momentarily extinguished. A strangled cry escaped her lips, swallowed by the cavern's oppressive silence. Scrambling back up, she fumbled to relight the flashlight, its weak beam revealing the cause of her fall, a gaping hole where the entrance to the mine shaft had been just moments ago. Dust swirled in the air, settling like a shroud on the grotesque murals on the wall. Panic clawed at her throat. Cave in. She was trapped, buried alive in this dark pit of forgotten horrors. Faint thump-thump of the distress beacon, previously a beacon of hope, now mocked her predicament. It wasn't coming from the surface. It was emanating from somewhere within the cavern itself. The realization struck like a physical blow. The call for help hadn't been from lost hikers. It originated from within this very room, perhaps even from within the disturbing ritual depicted on the wall. The grinding sound, a constant torment throughout her exploration, intensified now, a deafening roar that seemed to vibrate within her skull. It was no longer just a sound. It felt like a presence, a malevolent force closing in on her. Adrenaline surged through her, momentarily overriding the crippling fear. She had to get out of here. Ignoring the throbbing pain in her ankle, Sarah scanned the cavern for any sign of another passage, a hidden tunnel, anything. The flashlight beam danced across the damp rock, revealing nothing but more decaying timbers and the disturbing murals. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision. This was it. This was how it ended. But a flicker of defiance sparked within her. Giving up wasn't an option. She fumbled in her backpack and pulled out a granola bar, the only remaining food in her emergency kit. Every bite tasted like ash in her mouth, but it gave her a much-needed jolt of energy. She would survive, not because she believed she could escape, but because giving in was a luxury she wouldn't afford. Next, she dug out a small first aid kit. Wrapping a bandage around her throbbing ankle, she winced with pain, but forced a smile. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. Her phone, of course, had no signal down here, but a glimmer of hope emerged from the bottom of her backpack, a head-mounted camera, a forgotten tool from her park ranger training. Maybe, just maybe, it had captured some footage of the murals, enough evidence to justify this crazy story. With renewed determination, Sarah began to explore the cavern with renewed fervor. She tapped the walls, listening for any hollow sounds that might indicate a hidden passage. The air grew colder, and the grinding sound morphed into a low, rhythmic scraping. It felt as though something was dragging itself across the stone floor, getting closer with each agonizing scrape. Terror chilled her to the bone. She was being hunted, stalked by an unseen entity, fueled by the darkness and the echoes of a forgotten tragedy. Sarah, a young ranger with dreams of adventure, was now trapped in a nightmare with no escape. The darkness pressed in, suffocating and overwhelming, and Sarah knew with a chilling certainty that this was just the beginning. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Dark. The scraping sound continued, a relentless counterpoint to Sarah's pounding heart. She stumbled back, her flashlight beam desperately searching the oppressive darkness. Nothing, just an endless expanse of damp rock and mocking shadows. The air felt thick with something unseen, an oppressive weight pressing down on her. Panic threatened to consume her again, but a flicker of defiance sparked within her. She wouldn't surrender to fear. Crouching down, she brushed away dust and debris near the base of a crumbling wall, a desperate search for any sign of an escape route. Her fingers brushed against something cold and rigid, a metal clasp. With a surge of adrenaline, she pried it open, revealing a small, rusted compartment. Nestled within were a worn, leather-bound book and a tarnished metal badge. The book, its cover cracked and its pages yellowed with age, was a ranger's log. Sarah's heart pounded with a mixture of hope and trepidation. It seemed another ranger had ventured down here before. With shaking hands, she flipped through the brittle pages, the flashlight beam illuminating faded handwriting. The entries spoke of an investigation, a chilling echo of Sarah's own experience. Darkness, grinding sounds, a growing sense of paranoia. The ranger described disturbing hallucinations, whispers in the dark, and a gnawing fear that the darkness itself was closing in. Then, the entries abruptly stopped. Had the ranger escaped? Or had he met a similar fate to the miners depicted on the murals? As Sarah reached the final, incomplete entry, a chill ran down her spine. The ranger spoke of a local legend, a vengeful spirit trapped within the mine shaft, fueled by the bones of miners who died in a tragic accident. The scraping sound, he wrote, was the restless spirit, forever haunted by its earthly remains. The log slipped from her grasp, clattering on the cold stone floor. Sarah felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. Was it the lack of food and sleep, or was something more sinister at work? The line between the ranger's entries and her own reality blurred. Was her own fear manifesting as hallucinations, just as it had for the ranger before her? Suddenly, a wave of exhaustion hit her. Her eyelids felt heavy, the darkness inviting her to surrender. She slumped against the wall, the ranger's log clutched in her hand. As sleep threatened to claim her, a whisper echoed in the darkness, so faint she couldn't be sure it was real. "Help us," it rasped, a chilling plea lost in the suffocating blackness. Sarah jerked awake, heart hammering against her ribs. Had she imagined it? Or was the legend true? Was she trapped not just by the collapsed entrance, but also by the restless spirits of the past, forever doomed to repeat their tragic fate? The answer remained shrouded in the darkness, as unforgiving and relentless as the scraping sounds that continued to echo through the cavern. Chapter 6. Confrontation. Sarah bolted upright, adrenaline jolting her awake. The chilling whisper still lingered in the air, a spectral echo that sent shivers down her spine. The ranger's log lay crumpled on the floor, its contents branded into her memory, a vengeful spirit, darkness, and the relentless scraping sound. It felt less like a local legend, now and more like a terrifying reality. Desperate for escape, she scanned the cavern walls with renewed urgency. Was there anything the ranger might have missed? A flicker of movement caught her eye, a faint crack in the wall, barely noticeable in the dim light. Hope surged through her, a hidden tunnel, a chance to escape this oppressive darkness. With trembling hands, she probed the crack. It was loose, giving way with a satisfying crunch. Squeezing through the narrow opening, she found herself in a cramped tunnel, the air thick with dust and the smell of damp earth. It wasn't much, but it was an escape, a path away from the relentless scraping and the suffocating darkness. As she crawled through the tunnel, the The scraping sound intensified, morphing into a bone-chilling shriek that seemed to reverberate through her very bones. The tunnel walls began to close in, the air growing colder and more stagnant. Claustrophobia clawed at her throat, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. Was the tunnel collapsing, or was something else at work? Suddenly, the earth beneath her gave way. Sarah tumbled forward, landing with a painful thud on a cold, hard surface. Disoriented, she fumbled for her flashlight, illuminating a chamber even more grotesque than the previous cavern. Scattered bones littered the floor, a chilling testament to the tragedy alluded to in the ranger's log. A low growl echoed through the chamber, followed by a swirling mass of darkness that materialized in the center of the room. It had no discernible form, a vortex of pure rage and despair fueled by the bones beneath her feet. This was the entity, the vengeful spirit trapped within the mine shaft. Sarah stumbled back, terror paralyzing her. It was everything she'd feared, a terrifying manifestation of darkness and despair. The entity pulsed with an otherworldly energy, its unseen tendrils reaching out, manipulating the chamber walls. The tunnel behind her collapsed with a deafening roar, cutting off her escape. The entity focused its malevolent energy on Sarah, its formless mass warping and twisting like a reflection in a broken mirror. In its swirling darkness, Sarah saw her deepest fears reflected back at her, the doubt that had plagued her as a ranger, the fear of failure, the loneliness of being trapped and forgotten. The entity surged towards her, its formless tendrils reaching out to consume her. But Sarah, fueled by a desperate will to survive, fought back. Tears streamed down her face, a mixture of fear and defiance. She wouldn't surrender to her fears. She wouldn't become another victim in the darkness. "This isn't real," she screamed, her voice echoing through the chamber. "You're nothing but darkness. You can't hurt me." The entity faltered, its formless mass seemingly surprised by her defiance. Sarah wasn't sure if it understood her words, but it reacted nonetheless. The room pulsed with energy, and a sense of desperation hung in the air. This wasn't just a vengeful spirit, it was a being fueled by pain and sorrow. It craved release, not more victims. In that moment, a sliver of hope pierced through the suffocating darkness. Perhaps there was another way. Perhaps there was more to this story than simple revenge. Chapter 7. The Price of Escape. The entity recoiled, its swirling darkness momentarily disrupted by Sarah's outburst. A sense of desperation hung heavy in the air, replacing the earlier raw rage. It wasn't just a vengeful spirit, it was a being consumed by an endless cycle of pain and sorrow. It yearned for escape, not more victims. A flicker of hope, fragile yet persistent, ignited within Sarah. "There has to be another way," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Release me, and I'll find a way to set you free." The entity pulsed in response, its formless tendrils seeming to writhe in contemplation. Sarah grasped at this sliver of hope. Perhaps the legend wasn't entirely accurate. Maybe the spirit wasn't a vengeful demon, but something more, a tortured soul trapped in an endless purgatory. "I can offer you something," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "Something precious to me. In exchange, you have to let me go." Uncertainty flickered across the entity's form. Sarah rummaged through her backpack, the meager contents offering little appeal. Then, her fingers brushed against the worn leather photo tucked in a side pocket. It was a picture of her younger self, beaming at the camera with her family on their first camping trip. It wasn't much, but it represented everything she held dear: family, hope, a future beyond this oppressive darkness. With a deep breath, she pulled out the photo, holding it out towards the entity. "This is my most precious possession," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "Take it, but promise to let me leave." The entity swirled, its focus shifting between Sarah and the photograph. In its formless depths, Sarah saw a flicker of something that resembled gratitude. Slowly, a tendril reached out, not with violence, but with a cautious curiosity. It touched the photo, the image rippling and distorting under its touch. Then, with a deafening roar, the chamber began to crumble. The earth trembled, dust filling the air. Sarah shielded her face, bracing for impact. But instead of collapsing on her, the debris seemed to move around her, clearing a path towards the entrance. The entity pulsed with an otherworldly light, its formless mass solidifying momentarily into a semi-transparent figure of a miner, etched with lines of sorrow and despair. It looked at Sarah, a flicker of something akin to peace flickering in its eyes. Then, with a final, mournful wail, the figure disintegrated into a shimmering mist that seeped into the collapsing chamber. Sarah stumbled out of the mine shaft, the weight of the experience bearing down on her. Dawn was breaking, casting a golden glow over the redwood canopy. The once familiar woods now seemed alien, imbued with a sense of the unknown. She managed to contact help, her voice weak but filled with relief. As they pulled her from the wreckage, Sarah held tightly onto the ranger's log, the only remaining evidence of her ordeal. The legend, she realized, was just a twisted echo of the truth. The miners hadn't been killed in an accident. They had been trapped by a cave-in, their souls forever bound to the mine shaft by despair. The entity, born from their collective suffering, yearned not for revenge, but for a release it had never received. The photo in her hand was discolored and warped, the image of her smiling family barely recognizable. But it held a new meaning for Sarah now. It was a reminder of the light she had clung to in the darkness, a testament to the human spirit's ability to find even the smallest spark of hope, even in the face of the unknown. The experience had changed her forever, leaving her marked by the darkness, but also empowered by her resilience. Chapter 8: The Haunting. Sunlight streamed through the hospital window, painting harsh lines across Sarah's pale face. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the sterile white room, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the collapsing mine shaft that echoed in her dreams. Physically, she was recovering. Scrapes and bruises adorned her body, a map of the ordeal she'd endured. But the true battle scars resided deep within, invisible wounds etched by fear and the chilling whispers of the darkness. The ranger's log, clutched tightly in her hand, served as a constant reminder. Its faded pages held the key to the truth, the tragic story of the miners and the entity born from their despair. Sarah had offered a piece of herself, a symbol of hope to break the cycle of suffering. But had it been enough? Sleep offered no escape. The grinding sound, relentless and bone-chilling, haunted her dreams. It wasn't a precise memory, but a chilling echo, a constant reminder of the unseen presence that had stalked her in the darkness. Her return to civilization was met with a mixture of relief and concern. The news media dubbed her a hero ranger, her story a harrowing tale of survival. But the forced smiles and well-meaning platitudes couldn't mask the hollowness she felt inside. How could they understand the true cost of her escape? One night, as she lay awake, the grinding sound filled her ears again. She bolted upright, heart pounding a frantic tattoo against her ribs. Was it just another nightmare? Or was it something more? Panic clawed at her throat. She stumbled to the window, throwing it open. Cool night air washed over her, carrying the familiar sounds of crickets chirping and the wind rustling through the trees. Relief flooded her momentarily. But then she thought she heard it again. Faint but unmistakable, a low, rhythmic scraping sound coming from somewhere beyond the trees. A cold sweat slicked her skin. Was it just the wind playing tricks on her overwrought mind? Or was something else out there? A dark echo of the entity, drawn to her by the fragment of its pain she now carried within her. Sarah stared out into the darkness, a knot of unease tightening in her gut. The experience had changed her, leaving her forever teetering on the edge between reality and the chilling whispers of the unknown. Perhaps, she thought with a shiver, some things can never truly be left behind. The darkness might have released her, but a part of it, a haunting echo, would forever walk beside her.